Hello everyone and welcome to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 22. We are going to look at all of the pairs that we're watching, give you some analysis, give you a bit of a prediction, and ultimately give you some value for the next trading week. Okay, so before we actually begin, we do have a trading group that you can join. That link is in the description below, so go ahead and check that out and feel free to be a part of the community. So without further ado guys, we'll start off with gold. So as I mentioned for the last video that we did on the analysis, we were looking at this to consolidate. Now we're starting to see a bit of weakness, price retrace into this range here. So the current high to the low of the market so far. So what I'm looking at is a temporary sideways movement in the market. Now the long-term projection that I do have for this is a push towards the upside. I do believe that we do have another strong push to the upside, one final move before we could find that last drop and we starting to get on a corrective phase on the higher time frames. Okay, so whilst we're seeing price slowly retrace back up and recover from this huge drop from the couple of weeks ago, pretty much we can see that this week just been very slow in terms of recovering from this move. So all I'm looking at really is just waiting for some good buying opportunities and seeing if we can progress higher up. Now we do have this uptrend here. Now you have to be careful for this, because if we do see some significant break to the downside and it's clearly evident, so say for example we have this move to the downside but we have it labeled in this point here, so we see this price action break this uptrend here, I would therefore consider a sell bias. The reason for this, we are dropping immensely, and there's no point fighting against your analysis if you can see a strong drop. Okay, so if this does happen, we will give you a bit of an update and change our bias, and you look for selling opportunities. Okay, but for now we could be expecting some false breakouts into this area, just to collect some orders. So that's my interpretation of this, and we could even break just below. So I'm just really paying attention to this trend line here for good buying opportunities, but ultimately I'm looking to see if we can actually break this current high, so at 2070. Okay, so that's pretty much my directional bias for gold. Again, I may do a singular video about levels and some stuff, support and resistance levels, and how to get in on this pair, as it's being highly requested. So I will provide some tips through the week. So we'll move on to now New Zealand dollar to the US dollar. So my bias for this pair is to the downside. Now we've seen multiple breaks of our uptrend here. Now we're in a slow push to the downside, so could be looking at this level in the market to find some retracement into this zone here. So I'm looking at this point in the market to act as a form of resistance due to previous support here. So 1, 2, resistance 3, support 4, resistance 5. So very clear level here for me. And I'll be looking at this point in time, see if price can actually get to this point, see if it can react and continue to push lower, and I will be looking to see if we can clear this level. So my ultimate projection is to get into this range bound here. Eventually we could see price reach to 0.638. We just have to wait for price to get into this range, and of course it will take time. So again, you can trade on a lower level and a lower spectrum, and trade these swings to the downside, obviously to the upside, and see if this can progress lower. So for this idea to remain valid, we cannot push higher than this high. If we do, we'll obviously update this pair, but for now I'm looking for sells to hold on to and see if we can progress into this pocket to the downside. So let's see that range. Actually, I'm going to see how many pips that is. So it's just 200 over pips there. Good hold if we can get that. So that's all I'm looking at for that pair. So we'll move on now to USD. So for me, I'm looking at this in still in an uptrend move. You know, we've not had that strong break to the downside as we saw on the previous pair. You know, for me, this is where the trend lines they get. You know, you need to have some clear rules behind it. So if for me, if I don't see clear strength and a clear break to the downside, I will be cautious. So for example, right now, as we can see, this trend line has broken twice now. But for me, this isn't strong enough. I want to see a big, strong move to the downside, something like this. But for now, you know, we can see sideways move and we're trapped in between two levels. So for me, I still think we do have a push to the upside. So we could be looking at some buying opportunities potentially to clear the current high one more time before we get that big drop that we're looking for, and then we can adjust our trend line, etc., and see exactly where price wants to go. So I still think we have one more push to the upside before we have the deeper push to the downside again. And you know, into this level of the market here. So if I just extend, so roughly at 0.6700, sorry, 0.67700, you know, that's the range where I'm looking to go for the higher time frame move to the downside. So you know, I see this potentially seeing less volume towards the upside, because you know, if we visually take this out, look at the moves at a sentiment value, we can see how strong that this move was, and you know, progressing up, and we started to see, you know, potential correction. So this is, you know, sellers just instantly got in here, and then we've slowly made our way up. So can you see the difference between, you know, the time here for the price to make this much of a move? So that's obviously, you know, 26 days to get up to here, and you know, from this point we've gradually made its way up. So you know, almost double the time length to get back up to here, with the smaller price area. So we can see price is pushing up, but volume is slowly weakening here. So this is where I talk about time in relation to price, which most people forget. Okay, so obviously this is your time scale, but this is your price. Okay, don't forget that you're in this axis, because I always used to just look at the price. So it's just having a bit of a open perspective of what you're really dealing with here. So again, try and incorporate time in relation to your analysis. I think it may help you as much as it helps me. So this is why I'm looking at one potential final push to the upside before we get a big move to the downside. Okay, so again, this is the higher time frame perspective, but for the short run, we could be looking at one move to the upside. Okay, so moving on to Euro USD. So in relation to this push to the upside, so you know, you can see it's very strong. We're in a sideways moving market, no doubt about that. Why? Because you know, it's two levels trapped in between. You know, no clear structure to the upside or downside really. So I could see price coming into around this level. We may get a false breakout, you know, to the downside and then push back in. And likewise, we could get a push, you know, to the upside. So my bias is more one final move again to the upside before we could look into potential downside move. I do think we do need a correction, at least a stronger one. But we have to look at a bit more targets later. For now, I just want to see how price reacts and how it responds to these two levels in the market before we get a push to that upside or to the downside, and you know, review it in due time. So for now, I'm pretty much just sitting on this pair, not trading it aggressively, of course, just waiting for that move. And again, my long-term prediction is to the downside. Okay, so moving now to USDJPY. I think I posted this into the group, in the trading group. So I was looking at this uptrend here. I think my long-term prediction is to reach to the bottom low here of this current low, so to roughly about 104. You know, as we can see, obviously don't sell you know, aggressively, but you know, if you were to, it'd be 200 pips, and I'm looking to target and clear this low. We could push lower. That's just my perspective of the market. Again, pretty much just looking at this as potential sellers coming into here. So we will just have to see exactly how price can continue to push and react to this reversal zone here. Reason why I have this here is because we have 1, 2, 3, you know, 4, and then if you scroll back, multiple rejections here. So you know, very, very strong resistance here. So you can see how price failed to continuate higher. We're now testing this as a potential resistance, so we'll just have to see and pay close attention to this range of the market here and see if we can push lower. Okay, so now moving on to CADJPY. Same scenario with the USDJPY. You know, having a key level, having a close attention towards this trend line I've got drawn here. And pretty much I'm just waiting for the key breakout. And can you see how price is in confluence with a reversal zone? If I just extend this slightly, we could see, you know, if this does happen, we could get pushed to the downside, wait for that retest, boom, straight down again, potentially to clear the low. So 77.5 would be a, you know, good target to take. That's just over 200 pips. So again, these rewards are very, you know, I know they're over the hundreds, and you know, you need to understand that this is not going to take an hour to get to 200 pips. You know, it's going to take you, you know, it can take days, it could take weeks, it could take several weeks, potentially not months, but you know, it does take a long time for, you know, setups to develop if you're not patient enough. Again, this is the only discipline you need to execute, and you know, you'll definitely see your trading, you know, flourish into consistent profits. Okay, so again, this is where, for me, where my trading ability changed and it switched, is just by waiting. There's no other key. It's just patience. Obviously, trading everything, understanding it, but after you learn that, it's patience, which is the biggest discipline. Okay, so again, just looking at how price responds to this uptrend, waiting for that break to the downside, retest of this zone before we get that next closure to the downside and the push. Okay, so moving on to New Zealand dollar to the Japanese yen. I'm looking at this level in the market here, quite close. Paying attention to you know, how strong this has been acting over the past few days. For me, my bias is to the downside. So for us to see this, you know, being respected, I'm holding a few questions. I'm, you know, observing the market just to see if we could push lower, wait for that retest, and look into, you know, to take out this level here in the market. So it's roughly at 68.0. Now this bias becomes invalid if we break this high, so 71.6. So we just have to be curious and just be careful, you know, to take any aggressive sells, because you know, if you do take a sell now, we do have a potential support. So first, I want to see a big strong closure to the downside with the retest before we get a closure to the downside, and my target is this low here. So obviously you can see why, just because, you know, it's just a previous low. So you don't have to go complex with it. Just take your profits, get in the market, go out. That's all you need to do. Don't make it complicated, guys. It's really not that hard. So EURJPY, pretty much the same concept here. Just staying patient, staying aware of this trend line. Been talking about this trend line for a long time. I was hoping that we could get the break last week or this week. You know, way I was seeing it was this RSI divergence that we spoke about last week, but we had one final push, and again, support from the previous high here. So we do have one more push. So I'm looking at this to see if now we could potentially fall lower. We're in an overbought condition, so we could potentially see this to break lower, and you know, as a potential retest level. we could look for that break to the downside, that strong retest before we look to close into this level. So this is my desired target that I'm looking at, so just around 119.5. Long way to go. I remember that these setups do take time, so you know, for the if there's a reward of 500 pips, and I know it's going to take a long time, then you know I'm willing to wait for that. Less work and you know more freedom in my sense of idea. So just make sure you're picking your trades correctly, really, and just don't get greedy with your setups. That's all I could say again further. So looking at AUDJPY again, I'm looking at potentially looking for short still. As we can see in the market, we're getting very close to our invalidation level. So if we go higher than this, I'm in need of reanalyzing this pair. We're getting very close to it. Let's see how many pips we were away. So nearly 16 pips away for this idea to you know, become invalidated. If we do push higher, I will give you guys just a bit of an update around what I'm thinking next. But for now, what I'm seeing here, you know, we do have this level in the market. We can see failure to push higher, closure back in. We ended with a good, interesting candle. You see how that's rejected candle. So if we could get a closure to the downside, so a strong bearish candle, you know, this could be a nice selling opportunity. If we don't get that and if it's very strong, I could look at this level in the market, wait for the closure to the downside, that retest, and again I'll be looking to target this next zone here, which is around 72.8. So we do have some good levels that we can trade around. So if we do miss this, we miss it. If we do go higher, we will re-look at the analysis, of course give you that video update for you, and again we do have this second option here as well to look at. So don't forget, you know, if we do miss the opportunities, there's plenty more to come. We have all of these pairs to look at, so don't worry about that. So coming to the last two pairs now, so USD Swiss franc. So again, we're looking at a range bound market here. Let me check the RSI. So we do have, you know, a slight divergence here, particularly within these two peaks here, and you know we do have some potential switch in momentum. So for me, I'm looking at this as the final push to the downside. For this move to become invalid, we have to go lower than this level here, so lower than 0.90500, and if we do go lower than that, I'll obviously relook at everything and see exactly what where markets are going. But for me, I'm trying to see, you know, if we can get some buying momentum in. The RSI indicators, you know, looking divergent, seeing that here. But things that are crossing my mind at the minute is this sell-off pressure here, 1 and 2, which does look a bit convincing. We could be pushing down. So this is why I'm going to stay a bit more conservative and, you know, play the zone game. So, you know, wait for the closure to the upside, retest here, and then again push the upside. And then if we do get that push to the downside, just as a, you know, just as a bit of a plan B route sort of thing with this pair, wait for the closure to the downside, wait for the retest, and again push further lower. So again, that's pretty much where I'm looking at that. Slightly confusing. Again, we just need more time to develop and see how the market responds in the next week. USDCHF to the USDCAD for the final pair of this video. So again, RSI indicator is needed here. So slight divergence here. So remember guys, divergence is when the peaks in terms of the price is different to the RSI peaks. So you can see the troughs are different here in terms of the price action. So ultimately this just means that the volume is lower, momentum is potentially switching, and you know it's just a sign of weakness in terms of the trend. Okay, so how I'm looking at this is, you know, looking at levels, we could be potentially pushing higher. If you want to play the conservative role, just wait for the zone from the upside, wait for this wait for the closure to the upside, the retest before we get that break. Something to bear in mind as well, we do have this higher time frame downtrend to look at. So if we do break that, we could start to find a bit of, you know, price. Well, we could look at price struggling here, or we could get a strong shoot up above. So either way, just stay patient and wait for that opportunity. The next thing is, if we do get a closure to the downside, you know, I will give you an update on this. And just to see how things are going, because, you know, we could be looking at the final push to we could look at a final push to the downside. This is why I want to wait for this move before I buy. If I'm looking to sell, it would be a closure to this down level here before we get a retest, and again a closure to the downside. That's what I would look for. But we could get one final push lower before we get that slight break to the upside. Okay, so pretty much that's all I want to cover for this week. If you do have any other questions, feel free to message me on my Instagram or my Telegram. If it's about inquiring about the premium trading group, if you do want to join, feel free to do so. Again, I hope you did get a bit of value out of this for this trading week. We will be, you know, updating any pairs if we feel that we need to do so. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, just to stay on top of everything. And also feel free to join that trading group down below in that link in the description. Okay, guys. So again, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.